Hi gamers, we haven't had a Rivals patch in a few months that affected balance changes, so the NOLT board has lots of fun little topics for us to recap before 2025 is over, and we get that big Lorena balance patch. To start, I wanted to talk about some of the controller changes and get those out of the way, so we don't have to chit-chat about them too much later on in the video. I think that this post sums it up pretty well, but they say, patches like this just cannot continue. This patch has been truly horrible. Nearly every person I've talked to in the community has been having major issues with their controllers. Somehow the buffer system got screwed up, and everyone's control schemes have been reset with no warning whatsoever, for those who might not really remember their configurations. I love this game to death and have been a huge defender of this game ever since launch. Explaining to people who might not understand Floor Hug or don't realize that many other connection issues had nothing to do with Ether Studios. But this is completely indefensible. Patches like this need to be tested more thoroughly, no matter what. Pushing a patch this broken erodes trust in the community and is infinitely worse than a dry spell of sparse patches. If the team can't keep updating the game this quickly, just tell us. The mass majority of players would understand that resources are finite and time is limited. It would much rather wait a little longer for quality patches. I definitely do agree with this. I'm always very okay if the dev team is like, hey, we wanted to push this feature this time frame, right? We didn't make it. It's going to be out in 2 weeks or a month, right? That's 100% fine. I remember whenever Zetterburn was really broken back in the start of summerish, they kind of said hey, we're not 100% sure how to nerf him and keep him fair, but also feel good. So we're going to wait a month and see what happens, and that worked. I think Zetterburn's in a much healthier spot now, even though he's still strong. However, George did respond. He said, "Sorry this update has caused so many issues. The team definitely doesn't feel good about how this one went, and we'll be handling these type of patches differently in the future, likely with a potential PTE branch or something similar. A separate public beta is not always a great choice for a game our size. This is very true. I've seen games do separate public betas and they're kinda rough, since it just splits the queues and then most players play on live anyways. But this kind of update does need some more public testing. To give some more background info on a few topics people have brought up today, we have a couple people who have QA as a large part of their role. But controllers are a tough one due to the huge amount of hardware options. For example, our programmer for this feature has invested over $1,000 in the most popular controller types, and it still doesn't cover a ton of options that players use in the wild and expect support for. Also, we do have a private beta group as well that this is ran through, and we're super thankful for the testing that they can do. However, it's a smaller group of volunteers, so again, nowhere near covering all the controller types we need. Either way, fixing controller issues in the new system is our primary concern now, and we'll do our best to avoid future updates like this. Please keep reporting bugs, and after we get things patched, the new system will be better for the game in the long haul after these growing pains. It is definitely true. I'm not a super technical person. I don't have any background in programming or game dev, but I do pay attention to how a lot of games are made. I think it's super interesting. But I know the system that they did implement recently allows them to be much more flexible, especially with what kind of controllers they can support natively in game. So this update should be good in the long term for sure, but I think we are going to have maybe another few weeks of problems until hopefully it gets sorted out in that Lorena patch. I'm crossing my fingers at least. Staying on the topic of game optimization though, this poster says, the next big patch should be focused towards the game configuration and fixing servers instead of a balance patch. The title says it all. A year has passed since the game's release, and we're still facing some of the same configuration and network issues from the start. Here are the main points that concern me. No shader compilation during startup or loading is beyond frustrating. This problem has lingered for almost an entire year, downloading numerous mods and fiddling with various Steam launch options in a desperate attempt to maintain FPS is exhausting, especially after a patch introduces new skins, stages, and effects. A benchmark tool or something similar could hopefully make a difference. We need the option to save our network settings, whether it's in the main menu or the character select screen. Having to adjust our settings each time we go online is incredibly tedious. Please show opponent pings and their connection type, wired or Wi-Fi, before queuing for ranked mode or playing online in general. Coming from traditional fighting games, I didn't realize how vital this quality of life feature was. The server issues continue to plague the game. 1 week, connections are solid in a region, and then after a patch, everything falls apart, especially in Dallas or Chicago. In conclusion, while this game has proved to be some of the most enjoyable moments I've had on a platform fighter in years, there's still a significant amount of work to be done in terms of game configuration. optimization, and addressing network problems. I truly hope these issues are resolved soon. Really quickly before we go out and check Edalist's answers, seeing your opponent's ping wouldn't matter as much because it's server-based rollback. So if they have like a ping issue that's not going to affect you, it'll just affect them. Edalist does say though, we're looking at the best ways we can alleviate some of these issues. Currently, and particularly, your first couple bullet points. After we get a plan internally, I'd like to share more, likely in a dev stream, about our optimization focused plans. So we do know that there's going to be some more optimization patches coming soon. It definitely won't be in the next patch, as we know that how the dev team works is there's different teams that would do things like optimization, and different teams that would do things like character balance within the Rivals team. So I don't know how soon this will come, but we will be seeing some alleviations on those problems hopefully pretty soon. Moving on from that topic, I thought it'd be fun to do a quick rapid-fire round of small changes that we might see coming to the game that seem pretty cool, before we get to character balance details, which will be at the end of the video. This one says, Champion Abyss color for all the ranked medal holders. If you have Abyss skins, give the option for a Champion Abyss version of Champion Abyss colors. Give it an absurd price for all the people hoarding those ranked medals. And Dan said, hey, that's a good idea. We could probably figure something like that out. Champion palettes for other skins would be a smart way to add more medal content after we're caught up to all the released characters. I think that having the champion palette for other skins would be really cool. Like imagine like your favorite skin is Champion Arcane, right? And then you get the plushie variant, so you have like the Champion plushie skin. I think that'd be really cool. So I know a lot of people have been speculating like what happens once we run out of characters, do we just run out of like medal rewards? And no, they're going to be adding a few more, so I'm excited to see what happens there. Next up, Guthic suggested make lobbies play an audio ping when someone joins. It lets me tab out of the game while waiting for someone to join before I request a server. I think this would be super sick, and George actually said the audio plus visual cue is planned for this in the future update, so that's coming down the line. We also know recently, like yesterday, there was a patch that makes it to where you can join people through Discord. And you know, like the Discord activity, you can click on someone and see what game they're playing. Now we'll say like Rivals 2 playing Galvin on Julesville, right? Which I think is really sick and a cool way to show your friends what you're up to. This poster asks for an ability to sort characters for the Buckshop. They say there's already enough skins and palettes now that I think it's justified to have a character sorting option in this tab. And Minus just changed it to planned, which is really sick. I can imagine if I was a newer player and I had to scroll through like a wall of like shop items just to find my main shop items, I'd be a little bit bummed, so this should make shopping around Rivals a lot easier, especially if you're not playing every single month and you just want to see the new cosmetics for your main. For our last rapid fire topic, before we hop over to balance changes, this poster says, please add local X online doubles. I already asked for this half a year ago, but please let 2 players locally play against 2 other players online. This would help 2v2 live up again. And I definitely do agree, there's times where I have a friend over and we don't really want to play against each other, because maybe we play against each other all the time, you know? But playing 2v2 online is definitely a good way to shake it up and enjoy the game in a new way with kind of a co-op feature. I'd definitely like to see it soon, and I think the dev said it was a little bit of ways 6 months ago, so maybe it's on its way soon, I don't know. Hey there, sorry to interrupt your video really quickly, I just want to let you know that we're still accepting submissions to the Last Talk community montage coming out later on this month. All you have to do is to go into the description, click on the Google Drive link, and then add your clip with the background music muted, but not the hit effects. Then I can get an editor to stitch all them together, and you'll be featured here on the channel. Thanks so much for using code LASTTalk to support projects like this, and let's get back to that NOLT board. Moving on to the topic of balance, I don't fully agree with every single take that I'm going to present here today, but I wanted to get some community feedback on different characters, so let's start with Clarin, because she seems to be a pretty popular one. This poster says, this topic has been beaten to death, but I'm sorry, the Clarin nerfs were a slap on the wrist and did almost nothing to address what makes her frustrating to play against. In my opinion, her moves have way too little in lag, and there's no reason for her to have one of the best dash speeds and one of the best run speeds, while having the big disjoint that she does. And then a few other posters go on to say, the 1.33 changes feel less like nerfs and more like fixes of these. Only the removal of the tipper hitbox on the early frames of down air and F-tilt felt significant enough to be considered a nerf. Even changes that were intended to be nerfs aren't very substantive, like the end intangibility frames of forward special beginning on frame 16 instead of frame 10. 6 frames of startup isn't making much of a difference except in edge cases, and doesn't actually address why forward special is good. Strangely, in this same patch, that nerfed Arcane forward special for the exact reason is, previously, this move allowed Arcane to reach the wall with no chance of being intercepted, allowing him to easily ball tech any attempt to hit him during the move's vulnerable window. It should also be noted that Claren's hurtbox upon entering forward special is still harder to hit at ledge than Arcane's. Anyway, I think Claren is just fundamentally strong in a way that other characters aren't. Her base attributes are all good to great, with the exception of her awkward weight. Her disjoints and grab nullify each other's weaknesses, and she benefits heavily from floor hugging and how narrow of a window for whiff punishing it can be. And her gimmick doesn't adhere to any of the concepts that balance that other gimmicks. Conditionally, active counterplay, opportunity cost, and or resource management. I find it difficult to say what Claren's weaknesses actually are, at least in a way that I can with other characters, and even high-tier characters. I've more or less accepted that she's just sort of annoying to play against, and it is what it is. I don't think she's really broken or anything. Actually, to agree with this sentiment, I don't find Claren to be notably stronger than the rest of the cast. I do think she's on probably the upper end, probably top 4, right? But is she the best of those top 4? Like, I'm not sure if I could say for sure. But I do agree that the patches have been a lot nicer to characters like Claren than to maybe a character like Arcane, which, as we saw, went from probably being like top 1, top 2 to being like bottom 1, bottom 2, maybe bottom 3. You know, I think he's still pretty good. He's definitely not unplayable, but characters like Claren, whenever it's her turn to get nerfed, she's still definitely like high, top tier range, you know? So I would like to see some like notable changes made to Claren. I wonder if they could make it to where once you're hit by the tipper stun, you have more DI after the tipper stun is worn off and you get launched. I think that could be kind of an interesting change if you had more influence of how you're being comboed by Claren. But then if she is still landing those tippers, right, she can still combo you within those tipper windows. So kind of like the whole game balance idea of like ultimate versus rivals or melee, right, where you have more hit stun, but then you also have more DI. I feel like you could just apply that to Claren and make that kind of her whole gimmick where she has even more hit stun and then you have even more DI. That could be like a good fix, but it would definitely need testing in my opinion. Keeping on the topic of Claren and overall nerfs in the game, this poster says that they want to see Claren and Olympia recovery nerfs. I'm going to preface this by saying, I suggest the Claren recovery nerf as a Claren player, but also because I think most of the cast deserves some kind of recovery nerf. I definitely agree with that. These two are just the ones I feel qualified to give suggestions on. One issue with Claren's up B is that its multi-hits have to be strong enough to link into successive hits. It functions essentially the same way that Melee and PM Roy's up B does, and leads to the same problem. The early multi-hits are a vastly better get-off-me tool than the final hit, due to having very, very high base knockback, which they have to in order to link into the final hit. The suggestion I'm making would be to give these multi-hits a hit stun modifier, and secondly, make them not cause knockdown. The first is already a thing in Rivals 2, I don't know if the second can be done. It might feel awkward being actionable while having momentum from the multi-hit, but if someone falls out of the up B from getting hit by a very single early multi-hit, this makes it less bad position for the victim. When Olympia was first released, she was claimed to be a character with a weak recovery, and which as she developed has turned out to not be the case. In particular, her up B final hit is a strong edgeguard reversal tool, for seemingly no good reason. The biggest problem here is the multi-hits of her up B auto-link into the final hit. This move is 100% consistent in this area. So why is it that the final hit is so disjointed, but also so active? With 4 frames of hitbox activity, a large amount of disjoint, and a generous ledge sweet spot. This makes it easy to get counter hit by up B when contesting Olympia trying to make it back to ledge. The final hit should be shrunk for it to be more easily contestable, and or to have a late hit added on to the first 1 to 2 frames, making it less punishing to contest. Olympia's F-tilt used to be similarly bizarre, with high activity consisting of solely a sweet spot in the same spot for 6 whole frames until it was changed to have an early and a late hit. This is to say that this is not the first oversight in Olympia's kit. This nerf would not affect linking into the final hit in combos, so it feels perfectly reasonable to me. I really especially like this Olympia change suggestion. I do feel like a lot of the times I'll be trying to poke Olympia while I'm on stage and she's recovering, and I just get pops by that up B just at the very end, and I take lots of knockback, especially at higher percents, giving Olympia sometimes full stage control, which definitely doesn't feel too fun. I like the idea of maybe making the final hit only last for maybe 2 to 3 frames, right? And if making it last for longer, right, maybe you could then go in and give it that sour spot for the last few hits. So it's not quite as strong, but she can keep that poke tool maybe. I also like that they decided to add in, like, you would still be able to connect into the strong hit if you comboed with the up B, but not necessarily if you were trying to poke someone on stage, which is a really good way to balance mechanics like this. For our last post today, I really like this suggestion for a balance change for Maple, making her wall cling decay instead of being lost after you use it once. In patch 1.2.2, back earlier this year, Maple received the following change. Maple can now only wall cling once per airtime. This resource is only consumed if she wall clings for more than 5 frames, to prevent her from accidentally spending this resource while attempting a normal wall jump. The wall cling is restored upon touching the ground, grabbing ledge, or hitting an opponent. This change is fine on paper, but it created a couple of unintuitive side effects. After losing wall cling, you can no longer wall jump by releasing the jump button. It is difficult to know when you lost wall cling, especially for newer players. My main issue with the change from 1.2.2 is that Maple wall jumps by releasing the jump button the vast majority of the time. And having played a lot of Maple since this change, I can say it feels much more like an inconvenience that it doesn't nerf to Maple's recovery. I've seen suggestions to add a HUD indicator or other visual or sound effects, but I think the best solution to this issue would be to reverse the change and instead make it decay akin to Edalus Up Special or Olympia's Focus. Maple's wall cling currently has a maximum of 60 frames. Changing it to decay down to some amount, down to maybe a minimum amount of 30 frames until grabbing ledge or landing on stage, would be more in line with other changes that other characters have received, like Edalus and Olympia like we mentioned, feel much more natural to Maple players, and be more of a nerf like the changes was intending to do to Maple's recovery than the initial change actually did, since Maple currently gets the full 60 frame duration back upon hitting an enemy. I really like this suggestion because it would incentivize Maple to be a little bit more active in comboing people off stage, which she's already phenomenal at, but it would also mean that her recovery would have a lot more mix-ups to it, but then also a lot more of active thinking whenever you're recovering. Currently, in my opinion, I find Maple's recovery to be really strong, but if you made this kind of change, and maybe if you nerfed it from 60 frames to 45 frames of total cling for the max amount of time, you would have to see a lot more thoughtful uses of it whenever you're recovering, since you'd have less time on it each time you use it. I don't know, I think it'd be kind of cool, and I'd like to see what the devs could do with something like this. That just about wraps up today's video. Sorry for the lack of videos the past few months, and the lack of balance topics throughout this video. Those are personally my favorite to talk about, but truthfully I couldn't find a ton on this NOLT board worth talking about that weren't just people being salty and had a bit more depth to them. If you do have a take on the game's balance, let me know down below, and recently me and my community made a list of buffs and changes we would make to characters for fun that should be dropping in a video sometime super soon. As always, thanks tons for watching until the end, and join the Last Lock Discord if you haven't already. During the New Year's we'll be having lots of fun side events, like maybe a crew battle bracket, some doubles, or maybe even some Pokemon tournaments. It's always a good time in there, and I hope to see you compete sometime. Bye for now!